at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. Look for us at the high top tables inside, or if it's pretty weather, outside on the deck. You can find us online on Facebook, meetup.com, or go to our website at knoxvilleatheist.org. You can just Google Knoxville Atheist and it'll take you there. Just that simple. By the way, if you don't live in Knoxville, you should still go to Meetup and do a search for an atheist group in your town. Don't find one? Start one. That's right. Wombat, where do you want to pick up?
Hey, I want to talk about responsibility and accountability. In my mind, they are two parts of developing skill sets that make you into a more mature individual. However, with religion, you can actually stunt the growth in these two aspects, because in my mind, it's not just tools that you have, but it's tools that you have and regularly check and maintain and get better at using. And at a certain point, you can use them to resolve other problems that you might run into in the future, particularly as you're an adult. Because if you don't use those tools,
they're transferable skills.
They're transferable skills, exactly. If you just keep them in a closet and you never use it, if you never use responsibility, you never use accountability, they're going to collect dust. They're going to get braided, and when you need to rely on them, they're not going to be ready for you. And a lot of times, people operate under such a level of high cognitive dissonance or overconfidence that they think they're being responsible when they're actually being irresponsible. They think they're being accountable when they're actually not accountable whatsoever. And if they ever get themselves into positions of leadership or to a point where they can tell other people how to operate in their lives, they can transfer terrible, irresponsible practices and unaccountable practices to the next generation of people. That can spread just as easily as the effort that it takes to learn responsibility and accountability. In fact, in my mind, it's more easy to spread bad advice on how to be responsible and accountable than good advice to be responsible and accountable. So yes, let's set the record straight. Dread Pirate Higgs, I would love to understand. And if you want to do a quick mid-show invocation, I'm also totally for it too. But after you do the invocation, how about you explain to me good practices to make sure how to spread good responsibility and good accountability in the next generation?
Sounds good.
Okay.
God be me captain, I shall not want. He maketh me to float in salt waters. He steereth me through glassy seas. He filleth me bowl. He steereth me through the straits of noodliness, for goodness sake. Aye, though I sail through the heaving of tempestuous waters, I will fear not sinking. For thou art with me. Thy mast and thy rudder, they comfort me. Thou preparest a meal before me in the presence of me mates. Thou quenchest my thirst with grog, my goblet runneth over. Truly, pasta and grog shall abide with me all the days of me life, and I shall dwell in the galley of the quab forever.
Amen.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly concur. In fact, I think it's easier by virtue of the fact that it requires less of you, right?
Yes.
So these bad habits, not having to think things through, not having to take responsibility, absolving yourself of culpability, I guess. These are all easier things to do than take responsibility and think about things and all the rest of it. And so that's why it's easier to behave that way, and unfortunately to our detriment.
Right. I've got a maybe we already talked about sensitive issues on this show, so I'll just dive into this. But like, if you are obese, chances are your family is also obese. Like if you have obese parents, you're gonna have statistically way more often than not obese children, and it's by virtue of the fact that there's a culture of behavior that is not being corrected when it comes to rearing a child. So like when even yesterday I saw an obese couple and they had a child and the kid was also very round as well, and I thought to myself, like, it's not my responsibility as someone who does not know these people whatsoever to talk about good eating habits or like where to eat, or like, hey, that much soda is not good to like chug in like one sitting. That's like probably a day's worth of calories in there. But these are questions that the couple aren't asking each other or correcting, and they're just handing off with very little effort the energy into the kid. And now I have to think about the flip side. So like, what would it take to be a fit couple, right? Who has to exercise regularly and then have a kid and then instill those behaviors in the kid and be like, kid, you also have to work out well. I know donuts taste good. I know Halloween has a lot of candy, but here's the reason why you have to be more responsible and accountable for your actions, because it leads to better long-term health, as evidenced by us who've been doing all this work our entire lives. That's so much ask. That's so, as Dred, as you said, it's so much to ask for a person to be responsible and accountable. But at the end of the day, that's what, in my opinion, the purpose of my life, or what purpose of life is. It's not just to exist. It's to set a standard for yourself and meet it through your actions.
Absolutely. And yes, I've been actually on this quite a bit with people just in the last few days, just in conversations I've had. Jean-Paul Sartre, he talked about authenticity, right? Living authentically as opposed to living in bad faith. And he made, I don't know if I brought this up before about the waiter. He brings up an example of the waiter. A waiter who has been a waiter a long time is a waiter, right? But a person who's just starting off being a waiter is acting in bad faith because he's pretending to be something he is not. Right. And that's the difference between people in real life, is whether or not you, in accepting responsibility for who you are, what you're doing, you sometimes, people will deflect or make themselves victims of their circumstances. Like, for instance, you were talking about obese people. Often I would hear, well, I've got a slow metabolism. Or it's not due to their own actions. They're a victim of their circumstances, and that is why they don't accept responsibility for their condition. It's just passing it on to someone else. That way, they don't have to be responsible for it, and then they have a ready excuse to.
I've seen race be used as an excuse for why people are obese. It's like, I live in a low income environment and there's only a gas station and stuff like this. Like, true, but
there's only craft dinner available. Yeah.
You have a car and the grocery store is in town here, and the aisle for the vegetables is like right next to the entrance, right? It's like, well, I have it's like, you at a certain point you have to be accountable for yourself, right?
Instead of driving 3 blocks to pick up craft dinner, you can walk there.
There's ways. There's ways.
Little things, right?
Little things. It's really, honestly, that all it is, and it's an exercise of discipline at the end of the day. And I think it doesn't just hit diet. I think it goes to how we treat people. I think it goes to how we vote. It goes to how we think. It goes to how we act and conduct ourselves. These are actions that we need to be able to discipline ourselves with. And the reason why I care about the actions, belief, in my opinion, is an action. But the idea that we have things that impact each other, right? That's the things I care about in society. The things that you can do that impact me are the things that I care about. And if you don't have any sort of regard of discipline with that, then it leads to potential harm on my part, or I could potentially harm you. We can get rid of these harms if you were to have some sort of accountability for your actions, recognition that you have an impact on my life with the things that you do, and a responsible sense of behavior that says, listen, even though I might believe in a supernatural God, I'm not going to use that as a way to impart how you should behave in a way that might, distress you or make you uncomfortable. I'm going to have my personal beliefs, but we're going to have a conductive code of ethics that's equal for everybody, that hopefully enhances the quality of all of our lives without having to necessarily partake or lean towards me or be biased towards me, because that's my personal God, and that makes me feel better. That's the worldview that I'd love for us to slowly evolve towards faster, because I think we're getting there, but it's just taking us some time.
Well, exactly. And, certainly I tire of hearing people say, well, I can't help it. That's the way I was raised. I was like, that's the last thing you should actually rely on. Like if you are just the result of your upbringing, then you're not self-directed at all.
Right. It makes me
or
scared.
you are in certain respects, but not in the respects that matter.
Right.
Right.
Larry, you said something like Jesus take the wheel, and I think that was a good point, because the last conversation I had with a Christian, like in a near Socratic examination format,
Right.
was he brought it up. I'm so over at this point, but like I'm really still good at having these conversations. So like he brought up, well, I don't understand why atheists just have no hope and blah blah. It's like, nope, we have hope. It's like, well, why do you believe in your God? He's like, well, it just makes sense to me. Is that a reliable way to come? It's like, actually, no, it's not. But and then we're just driving and drifting a little bit, and I'm like, you know what? You can believe in God. It's okay. You can believe in God just as long as you like keep asking yourselves these questions, man. It's like, oh, okay. Like I don't want the Jesus take the wheel mentality to be shooken out of a person who's currently my pilot, right? Because I can see that as current harm, right? But I do want people,
cab driver.
right. But I do want people to continue to ask these questions in like more calm and controlled settings, because I think these are good questions to ask. I think it's just as good to ask these questions, but there's a time and place for everything, right? And so that's me being responsible and accountable, because I don't want to get in a car accident or distract somebody or like have a real shake of faith. But I think even if someone is religious and they want to be religious, because that's why most people are religious, they want to be, you can still ask these questions and come up with better answers and still be religious, because I would love to have better answers for why people are religious compared to what we have now. And I think if you care about those answers, if you care about really good answers for why you're religious, you need to look at other people who believe the same thing you do and recognize when bad answers are being given and go to those people in your own faith and correct them, because you have a responsibility to make sure that your brand, your religion, is being advocated and expressed in the highest format of clarity and logic possible, so that people who aren't born into your religion can look at what you're saying from your followers and be like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to now subscribe to this belief. That would be so good. That benefits everybody.
Or at least see that it is the result of reason, or some thinking.
Right. It's a responsible thing to do.
Accepting things on blind faith, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's not just small things or like medium things like your job or whatever, which direction your life is going. We're talking life and death here. Look at Christian scientists. They don't believe in modern medicine. They don't believe in blood transfusions and things like that. We're talking, how many times have atheists looked at these situations where these Christian scientists have let their children die or their relatives die because they won't get even minimal medical treatment for these people? Take responsibility for your family. I mean, they're your family. You'd want them to take responsibility for you and do what is necessary to protect them.
Right. And I think the other weird thing is, I think there's, at least in America, Dred, I'd love to hear if this Venn diagram also makes sense, but people who don't trust the government, that's a circle. People who absolutely trust God, right? Which, in my opinion, is like the greatest governor of all time, right?
Absolutely.
Why is there this near overlap, or like near almost overlap, of people who are like, I don't want the government telling me what to do. Don't tread on me. Also, I love God and I'm going to do whatever that being tells me.
Or the preacher tells me he wants.
It's
like, have you met God? Have you met a governor? Like, no, I hate governors, but I love God. It's like, who's more powerful? God. But you don't trust the government. It's like, no, they get in the way and they tell me what to do, and they try to take. They don't
want to live in a governmental dictatorship, but they're happy to live into a religious dictatorship.
Right. What's up with that?
Universal authoritarianism, right?
Right.
It's interesting, and actually, I was watching. Well, I've been watching a number of things like Peter Boghossian, who, of course, wrote the manual on creating atheists, which has started the whole SE movement, street epistemology movement, and others of that sort of bent. It seems that people who believe in, conspiracy theories and God, and would forsake, corporal, authority, are people who think they're part of an inner circle.
Right.
They've got the inside track on knowledge, and they're bucking authority because they think that they have special access to an omnipotent being,
Right.
and or inner knowledge that's superior to everyone else, despite the evidence. Right.
We had discussed this last week, but there are two parts of our brain, right? That lizard brain, and then
Yes.
the
Three
the
parts
wrinkly
actually,
stuff.
but
I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. So we have multiple parts to our brain. We have some basic parts, and then we have more advanced parts, and we do some of our high level thinking on,
because evolution has built upon what was previously there.
building on
Exactly.
the foundations. Yeah.
And this is, so there are also can you hear me still? Okay, good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My cat was on my interface. So the idea that we have multiple parts of our brain, they don't necessarily communicate with all of each other as quickly as we'd like them to. And it's sort of the problems where it's like, I can touch a hot thing until my finger burns. And I'll be like, oh, I burned myself, versus I stub my toe and my brain's like, wait for it. Wait for it. You're gonna, oh, this is gonna be terrible. I'm like, dang it, this is gonna suck. And then finally hits it, you're like, oh, I'm in so much pain. Same thing when I get like my
true.
stick between the legs. I'll be like, now everyone pause. In 5 minutes, I'm gonna be on the floor. But anyway, the idea is there's this thing called, and it's not necessarily a part of the brain, but it's like id, etc. But ego is a component of our thinking process that I feel biases how we interpret reality. And it can do so in this very intrusive, but also completely terrible way, just like fundamentally terrible way. Like, I wish we could just get rid of ego, which is the idea of the things that I use more often are the things that I trust, because they're the things that I use more often, simply by virtue of the fact that things I use more often. So if I believe in a God and I have a relationship with that God since I was a kid, then I think that's my God and that's my thinking process, and I'm more confident that that's true, even though there are other people who can have the exact same experience with their God, their own personal interpretation of gods, and come up with radically different conclusions. Like, I could see that in the world. I can see people with white headband or turbans on, and they're just doing what makes sense to them. And I can see people with the long beards and maybe like a red fez, and they have a different religion and they're just doing what makes sense to them. And I could be an old-fashioned middle America boy born in Ohio, and I got the Jesus cross around my chest, and I'm saying like, no, I'm just doing what makes sense to me. Everyone's doing what makes sense to them. They're all coming to different conclusions. They can't all be correct, right?
They're all following faith down different roads.
Why do you believe that one? Because it's the one that makes sense to me. It's the ego backing me up to making me more confident that my conclusion is true. And I feel like if we can recognize how ego can be so invasive with our thinking process, and recognize what ego is, and realize this isn't a rational or reasonable way to come to any sort of conclusion, maybe we can get rid of it. Yeah. Maybe there could be a thing that we could, like a pill we can take. Here's my thought. Maybe there's a pill we can take that just de-egos us for like a period of time, or like a drug at the end of the day. But like a pill that's just like, here's your ego. Yeah. And it drops your ego, and you can just look at the world and be like, oh my goodness, I finally have clarity. And then ego can come back and be like, I don't need this anymore. Wouldn't that be great? Like, I feel like that's some stuff in the future, but my main takeaway is
maybe you're talking about psychedelics.
But again, that would represent something that had no work to it. Right. Like, if it were that easy, yeah, sure, people would do it. But the fact is, it takes work. Reason is not natural to the human brain or the human circumstance. We've only had it for 250 years, since Galileo, really.
But what we really needed is like some sort of way to expose people who can't do the work, or maybe not willing to work. Just give them a glimpse of like, look, this isn't it.
Electroshock therapy?
This is just a trial version of clarity. You do it for like 2 hours and you just look at the world. It's not going to look any better. In fact, it's going to be pretty scary for like the first half hour, but this is what it is. And I feel like once you see it, going back to what anything else it is like fiction.
But Ty, I think this is, what I'm going to say here is pretty common to many people, is that transitioning out of that sort of rigid religious thinking isn't instant. It doesn't happen as an epiphany. It happens.
And
over
it carries
time.
with you a long time after
Yeah,
you
it
come to
happens
the
over time, and that's the
rationalist.
issue is that many people may have realizations that perhaps what they're thinking is flawed.
Yeah.
That cognitive dissonance thing, but then find a way to rationalize around it. Because if it were like Paul of Tarsus walking down the road getting struck by lightning and realizing, yes, Jesus is the Savior and He's my God, and if that happened in the reverse way, that would be great, but it doesn't, right? Typically, a transition out of belief is one that takes a long time, just because the pieces that you are looking at really don't fit together the way you thought.
Sure.
Until the point you just can't handle it anymore, right?
You're saying there's a fundamental lack of maturity to appreciate a transition of that caliber, such that you couldn't just do it in like a pill or a button. Yeah. It's the difference between some guy who spends a year learning how to rock climb and a person who just uses a ladder, right? Yeah. Like the guy who was climbing was learning how to discipline themselves to do something that was very challenging, came up with a lot of obstacles, learn how to develop different techniques, learn how to manage risk and efficiency and endurance, and change their bodies in a meaningful way, compared to a person who's like, why did you do that when you can always just climb with a ladder? And they put the ladder up against the wall and they climb up to the top and they touch the top hold and they're like, look, see, I can do it too. And they come back down the ladder and they walk away. Like 1,000 miles away, it looks like they did the same thing. But there's such a fundamental context there that you have to appreciate that the dedication to developing reason and responsibility and accountability, that standard,
and ongoing practice, right? Ongoing practice.
Ongoing practice.
You can't just train for it and then stop.
Right.
You can't stop training for rock climbing. When you're not rock climbing, you're still training for it, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, you just can't carry a ladder with you everywhere.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have a ladder. Yeah.
Sometimes you don't always have a ladder, right? Yeah. And so you have to think about, like, I am ready in any context. As a rock climber, I'm ready in any context to climb something if I need to climb something, because I developed those skills. But for the person who has a ladder, great that you have a ladder, but that only works on very specific things to climb, and you have to always carry that ladder. When you leave your ladder at home and you go to somewhere else, like on vacation or something, you are completely unequipped to climb things, even though you feel like you have the confidence of owning a ladder. If you don't have it on you, that's the difference. And that's what I feel like with the religious mindset. It's when I'm in church, I feel great. I feel empowered. I feel connected with God. I feel like a moral person. I feel ethical. I feel like I'm connected with all these people around me. When I go into a completely different environment where there's a bunch of heathens, non-believers, and like I don't necessarily have my holy book ready to flip through to the chapter my pastor told me to flip through to, how do I operate? How am I ethical? How am I moral? Aside from just the random verses that I can barely recite in my head. You know, I heard the saddest thing yesterday. Last at work. Some guy at my job who is the younger generation, I would say, like the 20s. There was a conversation I was overhearing about religion, and some guy says, "No, you got to read the Bible." And the younger guys were like, "No, there's YouTube videos for everything now." And the guy's like, "You can't just read YouTube. You just can't watch YouTube videos for Bible passages." And the young guy said, "No, because they're all 2-hour long videos." And I'm like, for a young kid, that sounds meaningful, because that means they had to sit down and watch something for 2 hours, because that's a big ordeal for like a kid in their 20s. But like for an adult, they're like, for people our age, they're like, what are you how is that at all relevant? How is that at all a relevant response?
Well, not only that, I mean, the guy has a point about you have to read the Bible, because theoretically you could watch Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments and understand Genesis, but it does not match the Bible. And a lot of these videos that are being produced does not match what the Bible says. You need to read the text in the Bible if you're going to say that you know the Bible.
Yeah. You know, just as an aside, I'm actually on a 2-day course with Bart Ehrman. You guys familiar with that guy? Yeah. It's a New Testament scholar. Very well respected in his field. Anyway, so this is day two of a conference of 10 New Testament scholars talking about various aspects of the New Testament.
And you can bet he bases his lectures on the very text that he's talking about, and not some kind of interpreted version of the text.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, pointing out, because he knows ancient Greek, he knows Aramaic, he knows these ancient languages that were actually used in these texts. So, coming to a fuller understanding based on evidence, as opposed to what people would like to believe, and actually including the non-canonical texts like the Gospel according to Mary and Peter and whatnot. It's very, very interesting. But again, it's just lending to a fuller understanding of what these things actually say, as opposed to what people have us believe.
Or tell each other that they say.
Yeah. And my takeaway would be is if you adopt the label of a Christian, it's your responsibility and it's your accountability to make sure that you understand the text. Don't watch a YouTube video. Don't listen to someone else read it. You read the text, you understand it, you come to a critical assessment, and then fact check it with other Christians after you put in the work. It demands a lot of you, but it's the most important thing you can do in your life, which is believing in God, right? So go through the effort. And then if you find out through all your effort that you can't come up with better answers that are currently on the market, make better ones. And if you can't still, even after that point, maybe you don't have a good reason to believe this thing. And that is a real conclusion that you might reach. Doesn't mean that you should keep forcing yourself to believe it. Maybe you're at a point where I don't have a good reason to support this belief anymore. It's okay to walk away and say, hey, I don't believe this anymore. Maybe you'll come to a point where we're at. I know I've gone through some rigor in that field that's led me to where I'm at now. I would happily abandon where I'm at now if I had better reasons to lead me back into a faith. But no one's putting in that work, and that's what we're demanding. Right. You have a responsibility to do it, not me.
Yeah. And we need to wrap up.
Okay. All right. Dread Pirate Higgs, final words.
Okay. Yeah. Mind Pirate. That's where my stuff is on YouTube. I do lots of shorter stuff so that it appeals to the short attention span of many people out there.
Cool.
MINDPYRATE. YouTube. Check it out.
Right. And I would say you have the responsibility to come up with good reasons for what you believe. It's not my job to come up with reasons for what you believe. I can just wait until you have the good reasons. That's what I meant by responsibility. That's my final words. Check me out. Let's chat on YouTube. Larry Rhodes, where can we find your stuff?
My channel is on YouTube is at Doubter5. The rest of my content can be found on my webpage at digitalfreethought.com. Be sure to click on the blog button for radio show archives, atheist songs, and many articles on the subject. You can find my book, Atheism, What's It All About, on Amazon. Thank you, Dread Pirate. You can find this show and podcasts everywhere. Just search for Digital Freethought Radio Hour. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. If you're having trouble leaving religious beliefs behind, get help from recoveringfromreligion.org. Remember, everybody is going to some other religion's hell. The time to worry about it is when they prove that heavens and hells and souls are real. Until then, don't sweat it. Enjoy your life. And we'll see you next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock on WOZO Radio. Say bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Amen.
Cool. Good show, everyone.
And that's right.